gilds the lily sky. You and we are here to manifest new clicks and flickers, stretchless snapping order and disorder among obscure subdivisions. Love and nothing else will do the trick. Reynold, it's all yours.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I especially like the last part of the poem. You almost followed my instructions. All right, so I'll start reading. I could just read straight through, but that can get rather boring if we want to pause here and there. If somebody would just let me know if you have a comment about a poem or you don't understand the poem, and I don't either, probably, but that's the way that goes. A little haiku. Writing a poem is like reading a newspaper published by the soul. I think a lot of people in creative arts have that idea, because creating means you're making something that doesn't exist before, and we don't know where it comes from, where the inspiration or where the image or where the lines, which just kind of come into our head. And I was watching several other poets, and especially, oh, my poor memory, somebody is very dear, and she mentioned her creative process. And it's like that. And I think if you look at a lot of beloved published poets, that's what you'll find. There's something that's going on that we don't understand. And if it was simply a matter of getting an idea and you knowing you have the full conception of the poem, a lot of poets, they would say, well, why bother writing it then? Because poetry is a discovering process for the poet primarily, and then it becomes something that may be valuable to other people. So that's always been my attitude, and that will probably be evident when you hear this kind of crazy scatterbrained stuff I'll be reading. The first one is called Mozart's Room. Mozart's house was preserved with his room and many of his furnishings and writings and so forth, was preserved up until World War II. And I guess that was considered to be a strategic target by the Allies, because Mozart's house and his room was bombed into rubble. So this is the Mozart's room I'm talking about. There's been one that's been restored, that's still in existence. Mozart's room, a quote from Mozart: "The music is not in the notes, but in the silence in between." Mozart's room was bombed to rubble. He sits in dust to write his notes, but said he barely crossed the boundary of a music that fills all creation. Sitting in that non-existent room, we touch walls to fill the pulse of sound that does not exist. We must cross the boundary to hear between the notes. This is one that was mistitled. I hated the title, but it was just a provisional title. I called it poetry, and definitely don't want that for the title. That's something you can infer from the poem, but I wanted something a bit more inclusive than that. So I'm calling this Strays. Open the gate and stand aside. You are not a shepherd. Forget about them. Let them wander off. Some will become coyotes. As you climb to high meadows, down into chasms, lie on your back, wander in clouds, you will find them gently gathered in words, or solitary and dangerous. Don't mess with them. They don't belong to you. They must be free and as wild as they need to be. And this is one, I was listening to the radio, and I think somebody published a book called Losing Earth. And it was, of course, about the environment and the destruction and global warming and that sort of thing. But I was really struck by the title, so I wrote these lines after hearing some of this. I just listened to a presentation called Losing Earth. Losing Earth. Since when was it ours to lose? We won't be losing the Earth anytime soon. What will be lost is us. Let's say we're a rough-edged object in Earth's pocket. We've worn a hole. When it gets a little bigger, we will fall through time to pre-existence. Earth will continue on her way, breathing, breeding, birthing, and nourishing. Through a crack in oblivion, we may see great trees with hives of honey, streams that glisten with spawning fish, and meadows filled with dancing feet of unborn children. So anyway, this is written in a different spirit. This is just kind of a little bit of foolery about a person I love very much called Jimmy Yancey. The Yancey Special. A special might be the name of a train. The Midnight, the Orange Blossom Special, a pistol, the 38 or 44 Special. All stuff of legend and song. The Yancey Special was no object, but also legendary. A bass pattern played on a piano by Jimmy Yancey, and it was something to hear. The bass keys rumble deep down dormant strength, rattles basement windows, sustains inventiveness as we hear the flight of right-hand pigeons from a roof. The bass accompanies the life he lived, readiness to encounter danger, unseen around the next curve. We know all this, feel solidity as we fall into his music. A running train of thought was the smoke above it. We may forget he played ball for the Chicago All-Stars, was groundskeeper at Kaminsky Park for 25 years. But if we hear what that left hand could do, we will remember Jimmy Yancey. This is somebody that I've loved since I first discovered him, and probably most other people do. Francois Villon. Villon. I found the poems of Francois Villon outside, sodden with rain. I could only think I treated this book the way he was treated in life. So this is called In Mountains. When I first came up to California, I had no idea something like the Sierras existed until we started getting together with friends, especially Arthur Tour. He became sort of like my guide into the mountains, and Jaharia also. We did family camping trips, and it was a special time. And after I got a taste of the Sierras, that's just where I had to go when I had free time. And of course, I had a full-time business to run. But many weekends, I would go off into the Sierras, and if I couldn't get anybody to go with me, I'd go alone, and that was a different experience, and that's what this is about. Back in the 70s, I got into a habit of going into the Sierras. If there was no one to go with me, I would go alone. I would drive as far as there were roads, then walk until I could hear no human sound, and begin to wander without purpose. Sometimes I was led to a flower or a tree, a hidden spring, or an animal. As darkness came, I began to see possibilities of a place to rest in the night. But once it got so dark, I made a random choice. I have to cough. But once it got so dark, I made a random choice. And I chose badly. Not only was the ground rough and uneven, I began to feel something dark and angry. For the first time in these mountains, I felt fear. My impulse was to gather my things and move, but instead, I stood in the dark till I felt calm. Whatever it was came close, and we began to sing together. And gradually, understanding came. I was feeling the anger of Red Brothers who made this their home, As I stood quietly, anger became acceptance. I spent a peaceful night. So this is called resilience. Resilience is about, it's about my experience of watching a documentary of the Chernobyl. And I was especially moved by these old folks that stayed there, still lived on little farms, rustic little places instead of the hot zone. Resilience. The old ones live there still, doing what they've always done, feeding their chickens, tilling, weeding, and harvesting the small gardens. Why should they worry about what they can't see, can't smell, or touch? Why should they leave the land where they spent their lives? They didn't leave for the Germans who slaughtered thousands. They didn't leave for the communists who slaughtered more and gave some people shoes. And they won't leave for clicks on a radiation counter. Hush and listen. They're singing their old songs. So I guess we've all written a virus poem, and we've probably heard them coming out our ears. But I have one more for your consideration. This was actually on the SICA page for a while. It's called Miasma. A mist floats beneath the sky till it thickens and falls to touch every blade of grass, every petal, every leaf, puts an oily sheen on ponds and a film on every eye. Everywhere we look, we see black rainbows and hear sounds broken into fragments that become a dust of silence. It gives cause to avoid the breath of our loved ones, the hands of our friends, and the nearness of strangers who might become friends. Our science has given it a name. I prefer to call it a bump in the tracks on the way to final catastrophe. We wait on a siding, each thinking our own thoughts. Who among us will see this as a fortunate mishap? A chance to dismount from a train to disaster and place our feet on the ground, to join again with an earth we've almost forgotten. So some of the poems are a little bit dense, and I don't apologize for that. I write down whatever happens at my time of writing. It's definitely a happening for me, and I'm an audience for the poem as I write it, and that's really the way I like it. So I make a discovery, and maybe that's the first reason for writing. This is called Praise. Praise the thick mats of loneliness on which we tread. Praise the thick mats of fellowship, the layers of our history, the many layers of decay trod into separate particles of dirt, all the separate pieces that make the ground where we will lay our head. Each step will waken cries of what was suffered, leave footprints on a face, press out shouts for forgotten triumphs, mass tears from lovers, crush the last breath from the dying. Mat of life, network of death. Walk on marsh and mud. It's a mess, sprouting. Praise all of it. So I have some that are not quite so dense, which you may appreciate. This is called Two Horses, because I do have two horses outside my house, grazing in a pasture behind my house. Two horses graze among my weeds, grasses, and wildflowers. They're owned by my neighbor, a horsewoman I've never seen ride. But I'm grateful for their benign presence. I could rent it. Pastures are a valuable resource, but horses have no money. What a fine world this would be if we had no money and paid our rent with fresh manure. here's one called The Day I Turned Green, and it's a true story. The day I turned green, I was painting a roof. I slipped and dumped a can of paint on myself, paint on my hands, my clothes, paint on my face, and paint in my hair. So I went home and knocked. When my 2-year-old opened the door, she didn't see her father. She saw a green man. Her face showed shock, then fierce curiosity. I said, "It's me, your dad." I doubt she remembers this now, but if she ever sees another green man, she may say to herself, that might just be my father. True enough, at this time of life, a day is fast approaching when I will be green again. So this is about a very beautiful female that I'm acquainted with. Her name is Emma. Does she know how beautiful she is? Maybe. But she gives little thought to things like that. When she looks at me, does she know her eyes are green with specks of yellow in the depths? Likely not. But like all who possess great beauty, she has many admirers in attendance. She lets me know in beguiling ways when she wants to be caressed, and I do not refuse. She will have a short life. Cats usually do. But while she's here, we stoop and bow at her behest. Does anybody have any comments they want to make about anything? Take a short break here. No. I'm presuming you're awake. All right. Hello, Paul. Okay, here's one called Buffalo Moon. Buffalo moon floats above the horizon, gives light to the night, delineates each leaf on a tree, proves existence by casting shadow. A shaman may walk on the moon, or so we are told, but for the rest of us, inaccessible for thousands of years until now. We've poked it in the eye, made footprints, marked it with a flag as property. It's just a matter of time before we begin to dig holes and bite off chunks or pile it with toxic waste. There will be the usual cries of anguish that something beautiful and pristine is being destroyed. What does it matter? There are millions of these things floating in space. We'll never run out of buffalo moons. This is called Tides. Weathering tides wash our feet, salt our sores, and push us back. Wash where our tears can't reach. Wash where our memories end and before we begin. The shorebirds feed at the edges of the tides, and our wish to acquire often finds something there, a polished stone or a shell to keep. Birds only take what is essential for life. What would we take if we were like birds? Pockets and pails would be empty when we forget what we want to find what we need. A bit of wind or sunburned skin, or the waves that strengthen our stride and extend our footprints through sand. Or the knowledge our footprints will be washed away and leave a clean place for creation of something new and separate from us, when what we are not becomes all that we are.
One more. One more, Reynold.
One more. Okay.
One more.
This is called Fortuitous Listening. Turned on the radio. What on earth is that? The voice of Michael McClure, reading his poems and recalling Six Gallery. In 1955, I was 13 and lived in Columbus, Georgia. When I considered the absurdity of time, I had no excuse not to be there.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was a very good reading, Reynold. Thank you very much. I enjoyed every poem.
Oh, well, very good.
People did.
I
Can you unmute people?
I do it already. Yes, please unmute yourself, and I can do it also.
Good. Well, I have to admit that I've missed a couple of readings, but the ones I have been present at were an absolute delight and an inspiration. And that's one reason I'm so happy to participate in this. Given my modest accomplishments or abilities, I just feel like it's something I want to be a part of. And I very much appreciate Emmanuel and all the people who have made this possible.
Thanks to your suggestion, we're going to try and pay our rent with fresh manure this month.
Very good. You've been here for a while. Yeah. Well,
your Green Man poem, Reynold, your Green Man poem, it reminded me of the time when I was your assistant.
Yes.
Doing painting contracts.
That's right.
And there is a California Highway Patrol building that I pass occasionally. Yeah. And I remember painting that with you.
That's right. And that was the delight. That was the delight because I'm here with Emmanuel, this poet friend of mine, and he's feeling some reservations about where we are and who we'll be around and who we'll be working with and what we'll be accomplishing with this work. Yes. It's not like you work for a homeowner. We were working for the High Patrol, which is an instrument of governmental control and so forth. So I didn't really have a chance to answer him because as he was speaking, we were laying out our equipment behind the High Patrol office, all the tools and things. The door opens and here comes this High Patrol and he's carrying a cello on his back. And he glances at us and he comes right over and starts talking to us about everything under the sun. It was an absolute delight. And that sort of, to me, was what I found working with these people. They were not as expected. There were many of them, quite wonderful people, many very creative, very gentle people. And that was an experience Emmanuel and I had to get together, and I really enjoyed that.
Anybody here who is going to be reading? Adelia MacWilliam is on our list.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Maya is on our list. And Latifa Brett is on our list. Yes.
No. Oh, I'm not.
And next week is from Australia. Harry's, is that right, Adelia? Rosita, Harry Smart, I think, is next week. Just wanted to pop that in.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be a late start or a different time on that, won't it?
Is that true, Rosita?
What? Say it again. The acoustic is in the moment a little bit bad. Sorry.
The reading from Australia won't happen at 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time.
Yes, then we will switch with the time, I think. But we will announce it earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. May I say something? I think Reynold suggested people speak after each poem, because by the time the poems have gone, it's quite difficult to remember any thoughts you've had. You remember a few, but I think it's quite funny. Once there's one poem and no comment, and then another poem. I think it'd be better perhaps if people could say a few things afterwards, each poem. Not too much, because you want to get on with it, but I think it might work better that way. Anybody else think that? Agree or not? Agree or not?
Latifa, what do you think?
Oh, sorry. I was just, yeah, I think it would be good to hear what people have to say afterwards, after each poem. Yeah.
Do you think after every poem, or maybe after 2 or 3 poems, you take a break and see if there are any comments?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
I think it's also nice to ask some questions, or maybe Miranda, if you have a question of one poem Reynold has read, So then ask this question. I think it's also nice to know more about your creative process, Reynold. I like it if we ask the questions what we have in after the reading.
I like your question
One of
about creative process because there isn't one.
Isn't?
No.
You just write.
No, what usually happens is it doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing, a line or two will come into my head and it just grabs me. And then the rest of the poem, sometimes it's like inevitable. I follow those lines and just keep writing. And if it's not a process of discovery for me, it's just like copying something out of a book or, you know, writing something that you know a lot about. And I'd like the process to be something that takes me into the unknown, shows me an aspect of myself or of God's creation that I wouldn't have had that perspective about unless this poem had come. And so that's what gives it a value to me. This is a way of discovering things. And I think that that is true about many of our great poets, and many of them explicitly talk about that. And one of them was, for example, Robert Frost. He said if he knew what he was going to write, he wouldn't bother.
That's right. Yeah.
So Reynold, could I ask a question, or
Yes.
Rosita? Yeah, Susila Wati here in Vancouver. I'd just like to ask about the preparation. Now, for example, I understand what you're saying. The words just come and then you have to put them to paper or type them in or whatever. But for me, I'm just wondering if you have an opportunity to set up conditions wherein that might happen, or is it just spontaneous? Because if there's a lot of external life going on and, you know, contracts or daily stuff, bureaucracy and things, I find it harder. But when I set up a time to relax on purpose, it could happen or not. But the words,
Yeah, sometimes the creative process works best if you make preparations for it and you have a quiet time or something like that. And sometimes it rather forces itself into your life, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's coming, and you know, you just stand aside and let it happen. And that's what often happens to me. The only one I sat down with any premeditation to write was the one I wrote about tides. And I thought, it's time I wrote a poem, and I'm going to write one, and I did. And something kind of took over. I mean, it wasn't just prevaricated, but I enjoyed doing that, and it showed that there's more than one way to go about something.
Which poem was that?
Tides.
May I ask a question, Reynold?
Of course.
All right. First of all, I apologize for being late coming in without any excuse. But I missed whatever you might have said about having met James Baldwin, and I wondered if you could address that at all,
Sure.
especially
Sure.
in context of the past
Yeah,
week.
I did meet some famous people when I first came out to California, and I just got the idea that you could walk around and meet these people, you know. And the first one I met was John Steinbeck, and he was an absolute pleasure. And he used to come to this little tiny experimental school called Emerson College, where me and 2 or 3 other super members were, and hang out and tell us stories and things. And that was just a delight. And that was about a year before he won the Nobel Prize. And he was kind of huddling around in relative obscurity. But he liked being around kids, and he enjoyed us, and we sure enjoyed him. And then there was an event on campus at Monterey Peninsula College where there was James Baldwin came, and he gave a very wonderful, inspiring, impassioned little talk with us. And then afterwards, he opened it up for questions, and we pounced on him. And we were all sitting in the front row. I mean, we were ready for this guy, you know. And there was a lot of people out kind of behind, they were just kind of wandering off, you know, but we were absolutely galvanized by his presence. He was a wonderful man. And so we just started throwing things at him. And many of the things we said were kind of naive, or he considered humorous, and he just kind of parried them this way and that. So one of our friends was big on Norman Mailer, and he came up with something about one of Mailer's propositions, and he kind of chuckled about it and discounted it. And but it went on like that. And then when the thing was over and he was getting ready to leave, we all got up and surrounded him. There were about 5 or 6 of us, and we weren't not going to let him get away too easy. And he was just wonderful. Just kind of parried us with effortless. He was so witty and so ready to parry and keep himself balanced and stuff. We could have spent the rest of the night doing that. That was a delightful memory, and he was a delightful man.
I have a question for you, Reynold.
Yeah.
How much do you edit your poems?
That is, I don't have a rule about it. Sometimes I feel like I'm on. It's almost like I'm receiving dictation, and one thing succeeds another with a certain inevitability, and that's the way I want to write, or I want it just to pass through me like that. Sometimes things get very stubborn, and I won't quite be able to carry it through to the end. An example of that was one of the earlier ones I read, which I think I called, it Strays. And that was really about the creative process. And it was about, if you're a painter, then it's about painting. If you're a writer, then you're writing about writing prose or poetry. And I got that thing, and it went, and it went, and it went, and then it stopped, and I couldn't get the last under it, and it took me forever. And I'm still not satisfied with it. Okay. So there is something called inspiration, and that's the primary motive or power behind our writing, I think. That's probably true for a lot of creative people. And then we can rinse it out.
So the poem that you read that kind of went into me most deeply was the poem that you wrote about our leaving this earth. What was it called? Losing Earth.
Okay.
Is that the one? And you had lines about how in the future we get little cracks through oblivion and we see the planet continuing after our departure. That was the kind of the truth, the theme in that poem. I thought that was a very strong one. Do you remember that one? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
We can't hear you, Reynold.
Pardon?
We can't hear you when you go like this, then we can't hear you.
That poem is called Losing Earth, and it happened when I heard a presentation on the radio, and then I just kind of wrote it out. So.
Yeah, I'd like you to send me a copy of that, please.
Oh, well.
I have a question because I get this sometimes too. I find that I've written a poem and it is expressing a truth that I, as an ordinary non-poet person, don't necessarily agree with. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I understand that perfectly.
Yeah.
So it's slightly beyond our control, Emmanuel. It's not just about what we know and understand. It comes from that out there somewhere. And that's, to me, what makes poetry fascinating, or the creative process.
Yes.
I think this makes the creative process interesting. This is about creativity. It comes from somewhere, not from us, from us. So,
Rosita or Emmanuel, could I ask how many days is it till the recording is posted in the Zoomuse YouTube place? For those in Canada, I can post it on our Facebook page. How many days?
Latest on Sunday. I try to do it now, but sometimes I can't do it.
No, I can.
Latest on Sunday.
Okay, so I'll try Monday morning to do it.
Yes. Yeah, okay. I think we're coming to an end, or? Is there something?
Yeah, I would like to say thank you, a big thank you to you, Rusida, for all the work you've put into this behind the scenes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
SICA World Chairperson.
It takes a lot of
Thank
patience
you.
sometimes.
Yes,
Yes.
even my English is not so good, so it's a good training for me. Maybe in the end of the year, I can really speak in a good English.
Rosita, also the way you post the little preamble, like Reynold's preamble, they're all very intriguing. It's a wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Yes.
And especially that you preview it with the little...
But this goes to Eugenia Stark. She's our communication person, and she's doing this posting, and she's so really nice and wonderful.
Eugenia.
So I will tell her, and she will see this also.
Yeah.
Maybe then she got it. It's for her. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah, bye.
Shoot. Shoot.